Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into Blood and Mud, the real face of World War I. A look at one of the darkest, most visceral conflicts in modern history, and how it changed everything for the soldiers on the front, the societies at home, and the world thereafter. When we think of World War I, we often imagine grand strategies, sweeping movements, uniforms of bright colors, and the march of armies across open fields. But the reality, as this review aims to show, is something much more immediate, much more brutal. The title Blood and Mud captures that sharp contrast. Blood, the human cost, and mud, the environment of trench warfare that swallowed men, machines, dreams, hope. We'll walk through the causes of the war, the build-up, the front lines, the experiences of the men who fought, the home front consequences, and the legacy that still echoes today. Along the way, I'll reflect on how this account brings out the real face of the war, what war looked like when you stripped away the patriotic gloss and propaganda, and what it did to people. We begin in August 1914. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria triggered a sequence of alliances, ultimatums, and mobilizations that drew major European powers into a war no one truly anticipated would last years. The fighting quickly stalled into trenches, especially on the Western Front, where both sides dug in, and the war of maneuver transformed into a war of attrition. By late 1914 and into 1915, the trenches sprawled from the North Sea to the Swiss border. Mud became a constant ally of no one and enemy of everyone. Rain-filled shell holes, trenches collapsed, men walked and fought in ankle-deep, knee-deep mud, and everywhere there was death by shell, by gas, by machine gun, by lingering illness. One recent article on WWI battlefields describes months of boredom punctuated by moments of extreme terror. A phrase that could serve as subtitle for Blood and Mud. Trench warfare created an environment in which the soldier's life was defined by the elements, the earth, the unending waiting, the sudden violence. The mud did more than slow movement. It swallowed shells, it swallowed equipment, and in some cases it swallowed men. Many perished not in the dramatic clash of bayonets, but in slow, grinding attrition, infection, exposure, exhaustion. The title realizes that the war was not simply glorious or heroic in the old-fashioned sense, but deeply, persistently brutal. The blood aspect is more than the obvious carnage. It is the blood coursing through the war machine, the blood of youth, the blood of nations. Because the war demanded armies of millions, nations committed vast resources and conscripted unprecedented numbers of men. The human cost was staggering. Soldiers surrendered their lives, limbs, mental health. Many returned home scarred physically and psychologically. Families lost breadwinners. Societies had to cope with the loss. The war changed gender roles, labor, colonial relationships, and geopolitical maps. One of the important points that a title like this emphasizes is the discrepancy between how wars are portrayed and how they are experienced. At home, there may have been parades, propaganda, heroic songs. On the front line, there was mud, filled shells, scars, rats, lice, constant bombardment, momentary charges, then more waiting. Men would write letters home, trying to convey something of the experience, but many found words inadequate. The book or the review of it emphasizes several major theaters and moments. The Western Front stalemate, the Eastern Front's more fluid but equally terrible fighting, the colonial and naval theaters, the entry of the United States, the impact of technology, machine guns, artillery, gas, tank, and the home front mobilizations. It shows how the war accelerated changes. Technology changed, societies changed, geopolitics changed. Coming back to the Western Front, we must consider just how damaging machine, guns, and artillery were when tanks and aircraft were in their infancy. Defenders typically held the advantage. The offensive almost always meant walking into a hail of bullets over open ground into trenches prepared by the enemy. Thus the bloodshed was enormous, thousands, tens of thousands in single days. The mud made recovery and evacuation difficult, compounding the misery. Indeed, a key part of the real face of WWI is this interplay of terrain, technology, and human endurance. We can examine a specific example: the summer of 1917 and the campaign around Battle of Passchendaele, Third Battle of Ypres. Heavy rains turned the battlefield into a sea of mud. Men and horses sank. Many died literally in the swamp. That battle has become emblematic of the mud, blood, and futility image of WWI. The review underscores that although generals sometimes had strategy, the conditions of the field often overwhelmed all plans. We are waiting, weary of sitting. Damp rusts men as it rusts rifles, is a haunting passage from a wartime novel, but applies to real conditions. The psychological toll was enormous. It wasn't only the instant threat of death. It was the day after day of bombardment, the creeping dread, the exhausted body, the muddy clothes, the unwashed hair, the rats in trenches. Soldiers said that what mattered was not the 5-minute charge, but the preceding weeks of trench life. Many suffered shell shock, known then in limited ways, as the mental strain overtook them. The review explores how the real face includes these hidden wounds, invisible, long, lasting. On the home front, the war demanded that economies shift, that women work, that colonies send troops, that civilians ration. Governments sought public support through propaganda. Grief mounted in families. Entire generations of young men were lost. After the war ended in 1918, societies had to rebuild not just infrastructure, but lives and minds. The review highlights that one of the great legacies of WWI is how it shattered illusions of war as romantic, heroic endeavor and revealed it as large-scale industrial slaughter. In doing so, it changed art, literature, medicine, politics. In terms of technology and tactics, the war saw the first large-scale use of machine guns, flamethrowers, gas weapons, tanks, aircraft, submarines. The review uses these to show how the face of war changed around 1914 to 1918. The mud and trench systems became part of the weapon system. Men weren't just shooting at each other. They were trying to stay alive in a landscape remade by shells, craters, barbed wire, and water. The review also emphasizes leadership and decision-making. One of the controversies about WWI is whether generals were incompetent or simply operating under unimaginable conditions. The review invites the viewer to consider that some of the failures were structural: new technologies, stale tactics, communication difficulties, and sheer attritional logic. The title, Real Face, demands not just horror, but explanation. What drove leaders to keep attacking? What drove governments to keep demanding men? What drove societies to keep sacrificing? Another element is how the war ended and what followed. November 11, 1918 brought cease-fire, but for many soldiers, the war did not end. They returned to civilian life carrying trauma. Many were wounded. Many found their pre-war worlds changed. The peace treaties redrew borders, toppled empires, Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and planted seeds for new conflicts. The review draws out how the face of WWI is still visible in memorials, in literature, in how we think about war. Reflections and takeaways. What does reading or reviewing a work like this do for us today? First, it reminds us that war is not only about gains and losses, but about people. Men in the mud, bleeding, waiting, hoping to go home. Second, it asks the viewer to question popular myths. Heroic charges, quick victory, honors those existed, but overshadowed by the everyday grind of trench life. Third, it helps us understand modern warfare's roots. WWI was a turning point, the first industrial war in many senses, foreshadowing the mechanized conflicts of the 20th century. Finally, it invites empathy for the individual soldier, for civilians, for the societies that bore the cost. In summary, Blood and Mud, The Real Face of World, is a compelling reminder of what war was really like for the millions who fought and suffered. It strips away the glamorous veneer and says, this is real. Mud, yes. Blood, yes. And if we understand that, maybe we understand not only this war, but all wars better. Thank you for watching, and if you found this useful, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history.